Yeah, welcome. Welcome to all of you. We would like to today look at how can we balance planet, purpose, and profit. And what, for me, the most important aspect of this is how can we become stewards of economic systems transformations? That sounds like a big deal, but I think there are lots of little steps that are really, really important. And I would like to begin with a story. I think it was the year 1992 when I was working in Zimbabwe, being a business advisor to several cooperatives. And at that time, Zimbabwe was an emerging country in terms of, hopefulness. And it was also a country, with a lot of thriving people. We all know that has changed due to a lot of circumstances and due to a dictatorship. And at that time already in 1992, there was a clear weather pattern changing. So it didn't start raining. And normally in October, it would start raining, and it didn't start raining for 4 weeks. So when it finally started raining, people were dancing in the streets. So it was really a lot of joy. But it was also clear that climate change, in retrospect, we can say climate change had already begun. So farming in rural areas was terribly difficult. There was a drought, and there was a divided country with a preference for white industrial agriculture, and many failing attempts to actually balance the society. There was a homegrown structural adjustment program and a lot of poor people. And then, what happened? There was a civil war, dictatorship, and the way back to democracy and economic performance is a very, very long way for Zimbabwe. So let me jump into 2022 in Germany. I'm living in the northern Germany, and I'm singing in a choir in a very small town nearby. And the other day, not just a couple of weeks ago, we were sitting there in this huge building and doing our exercises. And suddenly it started raining. And people were getting up and thinking, wow, rain, finally rain. So in northern Germany now in 2022, we have droughts, we have fires everywhere in Europe, in Australia, in California. We have reduced harvests in agriculture. And we have a tendency for division of society. Poorer people become poorer, particularly also with the energy crisis, with the Ukraine war, and the richer becoming richer. And there is a rise of right-wing thinking, and there is a rise of clinging to authoritarian rules. So it is quite interesting how there are similarities that we normally wouldn't realize. So the question, how can we balance planet, purpose, and profit, needs to be thought about on this background. And I think for now it is important that we just kind of remind us, we all know what profit is, but let's remember profit describes the financial benefit realized when the revenue generated from our business exceeds the expenses and the costs and the taxes involved, etc. So it is really profit is necessary for sustaining and for reinvesting into a business. But profit that is just pocketed and not reinvested either in the business or into our future is probably a misunderstanding that has developed, or almost pathological misunderstanding that has developed over the last, I don't know how many years, probably a couple of hundred, but particularly in the last 50 years. So this means that the current understanding that it's totally okay to just extract and then pocket profits as cash into wealth of myself or other shareholders, it is quite an outdated way of looking at business. So this means it's inviting not only competition between companies, that is to a certain degree good, but it's not good if certain companies grow and grow and grow and grow and others just kind of fail. It is also giving rise to a kind of profit mindset where it seems to be okay to extract whatever capital, be it natural capital or be it human capital, and then build my own wealth around this. So what we need to remember is at the moment, the poorest 50% of people in the world take less than 15% in total earnings, while the richest 10% take more than 40%. In many regions, it's closer to 60%. So that across the globe, but also within country, the distribution of wealth has been completely uneven. And we think that doesn't matter. But if we look back to Zimbabwe, then it really, really matters. So it's really time for an upgrade of the way we distribute wealth, the way we work with an economic model that seems to destabilize societies, and for sure, with an extractive mindset, it's destabilizing the planet. So then, how can we balance planet, profit, and purpose? So the question has a very easy answer. We can't. We can't, because the way we look at profits at the moment, it's probably impossible in the way we operate with profits at the moment to balance them with purpose, with planet, and particularly also with people. So, but this is not about going back to socialism and kind of playing capitalism versus socialism, but it is looking very clearly that both economic systems, socialism and capitalism, are built on domination systems, on kind of the idea that some people are worth more than others, or that some people need to be wealthier than others. And also in socialism and communism, there was probably quite a widespread accumulation of wealth. So both systems, capitalism and socialism, have actually failed people, and they have failed the planet. So the issue is really about, and that's the part of the question that is important, what is about purpose? What's the purpose of economies? So how can we move beyond socialism, beyond capitalism, into life-serving economies that build people's and societies' resilience and planetary resilience, and more than resilience, that build vitality? So the question, how can we balance planet, purpose, and profit in the year 2022, is actually an outdated question. So let's try and rephrase this question. And my suggestion is to ask, how can we balance planetary vitality, people's vitality, and business vitality? So if we do that, the purpose is already inherent in the question. Let's just look at vitality, and particularly at systems vitality, because here it is about the vitality of different subsystems that are interdependent and that are interlocked. So the systems vitality then is the capability of social and ecological systems, the larger and the smaller systems, to develop, maintain, and renew their resilience and vitality in collaboration and interaction with other systems that also need to be resilient and vital without endangering the vitality of other systems. So if we go back to profit, the way we extract profits today in our economic systems is often to the detriment of other systems, of people, of nature, of the planet as a whole. If we change this question and ask, how can we balance planetary vitality with people's vitality and business vitality, that is leading us into moving into a different path. Now, the issue of sustainable and responsible value chains are no longer an issue of compliance or a reaction to pressure by consumers, but it is a necessity, because we start asking us, how can we do our business and have a vital business while also contributing to societal vitality and to the vitality of people in the value chain. So we wouldn't just buy coffee in a very intransparent trading system, but we would look at how can coffee farmers thrive, and how can all the different elements, all the different producers that are along the coffee value chain, how can they also thrive while we get the coffee and have a wonderful coffee for our consumers? We know that this has already happened in like smaller value chains in, so-called niche markets. But this needs to become the mainstream market. And so it is with textiles, so it is with electronic goods, so it is with plastics, so it is with cocoa, so it is with all other kind of value chains. So we would, if we ask this question around planetary peoples and business vitality, we would immediately begin to walk towards a circular economy. And even in industries like plastic, where this is a huge task, a huge transformation task, we would really walk the path and in order to be able to answer this question in a positive way, so that we can really work towards planetary vitality. So the reframing of the question helps us to act differently and to develop different strategies. And so we begin very practically to exchange our economic system into one that is really life-serving. And the interesting part is at this part, we hit limits. As a company, as a corporation, we can only do so much. And we see that once we ask this question, we actually need to collaborate with different stakeholders. We need to collaborate with the public sector. We need to collaborate with governments, because we need different framework conditions that give us a better level playing field, so that we are not the only company walking this path. We may need support, as we can see at the moment in the energy crisis in some countries. And we need to also work together with different actors, with civil society actors, with communities. We may even work together with consumers. And it is so interesting if you look at the plastic industry. If they want to change into a circular economy strategy, the whole value chain shifts, because they need to step out of fossil fuel value chains, and they need to actually become more familiar with the value chain of recycling plastics, so they need to kind of find different people to work with. They need to change their internal organizations, etc. So the issue is that this question reframed brings us from competition and domination into collaboration and partnerships. And that is so extremely important. So if that's the case, we can really say the purpose of businesses is not profit. Yes, we need profit. Profit is important in order to reinvest, in order to be able to invest in the society, to invest into the future. But the purpose of business is business vitality in conjunction with societal and planetary vitality. So that purpose now moves into the foreground. And this means that we now serve the planet and we serve people as business, and that is okay. And that is not just non-profit. Profit businesses can serve the planet and can serve people, and there are many examples already. But we also contribute to trust in societies, and if we contribute to trust in societies, we help to close the gap between poor and rich, and we help to build resilient social systems. What we also do, we start caring for life. We start caring for people. We start caring for societies. And this is not just kind of this little pocket in our company that is called corporate social responsibility, but it becomes part and parcel of the overall strategy of the company. So, but that is quite interesting, because that brings us to asking new questions around what actually needs to change in our economic systems. And it is so important to understand that if we look at the economy, we often think the economy is the market economy, but that may be true in our current system. But actually, it is kind of very distorted view. If you look at what I call the market-based economy, then at the moment we have a completely imbalanced situation. We have a market-based economy with a neoliberal economic model that basically pervades everything, every level of our global society, even the private life, everything is almost invaded by this market-based economy. And this isn't kind of market-based economy isn't bad, because we need the market. We need a lot of freedom in the market, because the market is basically something very natural. It's a self-organizing issue. But if it's not really self-organizing as it is at the moment, because it's so imbalanced that people with a lot of power in the market can actually guide the market, then we need to look at how do we need to rebalance the market economy so it can play an important role in bringing vitality and resilience to our society. So we also need to look at the state-based economy at the moment in the neoliberal paradigm. It means state-based economy is just like a minor thing, but it is the purpose of the state, of the government, is to kind of create good conditions for the market-based economy and step in if there are failures. What we can see at the moment, if governments step in, if companies are in crisis through Corona or through the energy crisis. There's also the socially based economy. This is the entire world of non-governmental organizations, of civil society, of a way of operating in an economic way that doesn't want to be completely, let's say, dominated by the market-based or the neoliberal profits thinking. So this is the entire non-profit world. And if we look at what needs to happen in the future, it definitely needs to happen that these three elements of an economy, the market-based economy, the state economy, and the socially based economy, they need to rebalance. They need to become much more even. So in terms of market-based economy, we definitely need to say farewell to our addiction to continuous growth, including the GDP. But some areas and some issues should grow and others should decline. And we need to kind of be, as Kate Raworth says with her downward economies, we need to be agnostic about growth. And we definitely also need to look at the market-based economy. How do we contribute to societal and planetary vitality and keep our business vitality? The state-based economy needs to be much more regulative in terms of guiding the common good and safeguarding the common good. And the socially based economy should grow so that people can also interact in an economic way that is not only subject to profits. So this is an important aspect to really work towards life-serving economies, because this is the crucial part of our transformations, that we cannot just continue with our current economic system. And we need to transform it in a way that we do not abolish the market-based economy, but that we look at how can we rebalance these different spheres of these different economic spheres. So this is not a new thought. If you look back, and I'm a member of the Club of Rome, in 1992, there was the really famous The Limits to Growth report, saying we need to say farewell to growth in the long run, because it's going to destabilize our planet. And what particularly Donella Meadows, one of the authors who unfortunately passed away long ago, has said is we can go towards a society where we simply do not consume more than we can regenerate. So this principle of regeneration was already part of that report. And if we then look back, a Stockholm Resilience Center and scientists around Johan Rockström have developed in 2009 the Planetary Boundaries, particularly complicated model, that may be difficult to understand in the details, but what it made clear is that we live on a finite planet, and if we simply grow and grow and grow in the way we do, in the way of extracting resources and using resources without regenerating resources, we're completely destabilizing the planet, and we are destabilizing certain elements of it. That where we transgress certain boundaries, and climate change is one of the examples where the global warming has already fairly transgressed a boundary that becomes really dangerous for us. So in that way, And in 2022, now we have a new report. The report is called Earth for All, a survival guide for humanity. And this is an interesting part because it is building on the model of 50 years ago, but it is a kind of a renewed and a newly adapted and further developed model. And that has quite interesting elements to it that definitely says it's time for a new economic model that prioritizes the health and well-being of people. So what we have in this book, what is really fascinating in terms of bringing, and maybe not something completely new into the discussion, but bringing a combination of elements into the discussion that needs to be jointly attended to. And that is now the crucial part. We cannot just pick one, because that happens so easily in our world that people kind of are locked in certain thematic communities, and then they are all for energy transition or they're all for regenerative agriculture. But we actually need to look at these different elements together. They're called turnarounds, 5 turnarounds. And before I go to the 5 turnarounds, let me explain that this book has mainly worked with 2 scenarios. Usually you have more scenarios, and there was one scenario that was called business as usual, but the business as usual is so absolutely outdated that it wasn't even part of the book. So the scenario 1 in the book is called too little, too late. So this means we continue on our current path, and we think our current path is, we're doing a lot. There's corporate responsibility, kind of the companies become more aware of the role in the world. We have the World Economic Forum, that really discusses really important issues about the future of the planet. We have governments that are moving towards renewable energies. So it looks as if we are on the right path, but the scenario says we are not. This is not enough. It is like too little, too late, and it really gets us into trouble. And the second scenario is the giant leap. It is the question, what if we achieve the fastest transformation in history that has ever happened in the history of humankind, and achieve it consciously by really getting into action, by really making sure we all are part of this. And the issue is, when we adopt the too little, too late scenario, kind of thinking, all our discussions are going in a positive direction. There's so many more people really are for transformations in the world, but we don't really hit the difficult points, the social inequality, the poverty, and the energy transition is just like too slow. Then we may have a scenario where poverty declines. However, we have exhausted the planet in a way that leads to, and that is now important, that leads to social tensions. And what is so important about this scenario that is already announcing itself, if you look at the world. So we have a polarization in societies, we have much more social tension, we have a huge migration, a climate-related migration, but also a war-related migration. So we start to realize that climate change and tensions in the society are really belonging together. Now remember, my Zimbabwe 1992 scenario. Hardly anybody attaches the developments in Zimbabwe to climate change, but you probably can do that if you look at them in a different way. So this too little too late scenario means we're all doing our job, but we're doing it too slow. While the giant leap scenario is a different one. The giant leap scenario really says we are going to really tackle at least 5 turnarounds in a very, very strong and very fast way. And this is about the empowerment of women, which sounds to many people as like, oh yeah, this is a side issue. No, it's not a side issue. We are we have lived in a patriarchal domination system for so long, like scientists say, for 6,000 years, that it is part and parcel of the decline of our human development. So the empowerment of women is the number one issue that needs to take place. They need to be in leadership positions, they need to be in decision-making positions, they need to be leaders of societies, leaders of countries, and they need to be educated, and they need to be free to decide whether they want to have a family or not. So there's a huge kind of building site, that is around this issue. And it is hugely important. And there are lots of statistics that say if more women are in parliament, then the policies are much more forward-looking in terms of climate change. We also need to look at inequality, because the issue is the uneven distribution of wealth in societies is really becoming more and more of a problem. And as I said, the profits that get accumulated are not really helping people, and they are kind of used for repair, of very wealthy people, but they're not really distributed in a way that governments are really empowered. And that is another insight of the report. It is about strong governments, legitimized, democratic, strong governments, because they need to play a guiding role in the transformation. It is about abolishing poverty and really making sure that is not part and parcel of the future. We need to move from poverty to a decent prosperity of all. And that is, again, not a side issue for a number of NGOs and development corporations. It is really a fundamental decision that needs to be made. We don't want to live like that. And we need to set the systems in place that massively reduce poverty, abolish poverty. But there are two other turnarounds that we are much more familiar with in our discussion. And the one is food, because it's really about the land. It is about our diets. It is about how we produce food. And that needs to be completely and utterly regenerative in a way that actually, I think the most important part of the book says, our farmers need to become stewards of the biosphere, and they need to be paid and compensated and acknowledged for that. That is definitely the future of food production. And the fifth turnaround, we all know we're in the middle of that. It's the energy turnaround. It is the complete turnaround to, out of any kind of fossil fuels, out of nuclear energy, because it's too risky, and into renewable energies that gives us the freedom that we need to develop our societies, but also a resilience in terms of decentralized energy, in terms of the ability to produce the energy we need. But this needs to be taking place in combination with energy efficiency, because if we just continue on our path of growth, then we may need more and more energy. And so all the things that should save, our climate are going to be further worsened. So these are the 5 turnarounds: empowerment, inequality, energy, food, and poverty, that really needs to be tackled together at all levels, on political levels, on global levels, but in corporations, in a society, because we can all make our contribution to these 5 turnarounds. So it's time, as the book said, for an earth for all. Thank you.